Hello, everyone. My name is Mr. Inman. I will be your instructor for this semester for Government 2305. Uh, and so, what we're going to do today, we're going to go over the syllabus. We're going to talk about what's on the syllabus. We're going to talk some about what we're going to do this semester. We're going to talk about some of the requirements for the course, these kind of things. If by the end you have any questions, feel free to contact me at my cell phone number, which is 956-393-8809. It is also located on the syllabus. If you go into Blackboard and you click onto syllabus, you can find my information there. All right, so what we're going to be doing this semester, this is Government 2305. Okay, it's the first section of government, and what we're going to be dealing with is federal government. And so some of the things that we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about the U.S. Constitution, structures and powers of the national government, including the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We're going to look at federalism, political participation, the national election process, public policy, civil liberties, and civil rights. Okay, and so we're going to be talking about a variety of things this semester. Well, just to go over a few things that we're going to be talking about. Well, first of all, some of my contact information. I've already given you my cell phone number, but I do have an office. It is in Building T, second floor in room 342. I also have an office phone that you may contact me on, which is 872-6777, as well as a on-campus or STC web email, which is jjinman@southtexascollege.edu. And you may get in contact with me through any of those modes. The only issue with contacting me vis-a-vis my office phone is that unless I'm in my office, it may take me several days before I even realize you have a message. So if you need to really get in contact with me, the preference would be to call me on my cell phone. Well, what are some of the things that we're going to be going over this semester? Well, some of the areas in which we're going to be covering a lot of information, okay, is in areas like the civil rights, okay? We're going to look at the various issues that we have when it comes to things like civil rights. We're going to go over what the civil rights movement was, or what civil rights actually are. What are civil liberties? What are some of the technical differences between those two concepts? Okay. We will look at some of the more important civil rights movements, okay, particularly African American, Hispanic, and women. We'll look at and see what are some of the differences between these movements, as well as some of the many similarities that these movements had. And so, for example, when most people think of the civil rights movement, they generally think of the African American movement. We're going to talk in detail about what was part of that movement. How did that movement work? Okay, where did it start? Who were some of the primary players in that movement? Okay, what was the movement based on? What legal constitutional concepts was it based on? These kind of things. Okay, we'll also look at the Mexican American movement, which, as you will find out, comparatively to the African American movement, isn't nearly as well known. Okay, matter of fact, some of the most important individuals in organizations that were involved with the Mexican American movement, even here in the Valley, where the knowledge of this movement should be at its highest, they're virtually unknown. People do not know who these organizations are. They do not know who these individuals are. We will get into that. We'll also talk more about the women's movement. We'll look at, okay, what was different about the women's movement? The movement for minorities had certain characteristics. The women's movement had different. There were some fundamental differences between the women's movement and the movement for minorities, civil rights movement for minorities, that had a fundamental impact on how these two movements progressed. What were the techniques that they used? how quickly they were able to do things, etc. And so we'll look at the women's movement and how it differs from these other movements. We'll also look at political parties, the election process, these kind of things. How does all of that work? Well, when it comes to the syllabus, the primary thing that information you are probably interested in getting from the syllabus is what are you going to have to do for this course this semester? Well, so what we're going to get into now, we're going to get into some of the course requirements. And one of the requirements is that there will be 4 exams during the semester. There will be 3 regular exams based on the 3 different sections that have multiple chapters involved, and then an accumulative final exam, which will cover the entire semester. Okay. Now, when it comes to these 4 exams, they almost certainly will be multiple choice. Okay. Not that they can't have essays on them. I reserve the right to do that, but almost certainly they're going to be multiple choice. Okay. But only 3 of these exams will be used to determine your course grade. And so your final is optional if you have at least a 70 average. At the end of the semester, we got all the regular work done. You've turned in all your quizzes. You've done the 3 regular exams, and you have a 70 or higher average, okay, in the class. Your final is optional. You do not have to take it, okay? Matter of fact, there will really be only 2 groups of people who probably or will either have to or want to take the final. The first are people who are making less than 70. If you don't have a 70 average, you have to take the final, okay? The other group, and this is the only group that really has anything to think about, are those groups that are people who are close enough to another letter grade that taking a final could maybe boost them above and get them to a higher letter grade. And so it's you had a 70 average, something average, but one of your exams you did really bad on, you could retake that exam, take the final, and if you score better, it will replace the lowest grade of your other 3 exams. And that could be enough to give you a higher letter grade, especially if you really bombed one exam, but you did pretty good on the other 2. Okay, matter of fact, what this means is even if you really terribly bombed the first exam, say you make it in the 30s or something crazy like that, you still have the opportunity and the ability to end up with an A in the class because you can simply take the final to replace that grade, especially if then on the next 2 exams you did really well on, and you did well on your quizzes and all that kind of stuff. And so when it comes to your exams are going to be based primarily on your lecture notes. Okay, matter of fact, about 80% of the questions on your exam will come directly off your lecture notes. Okay, the other 20% will come off the text out of the textbook. And so if you're going to want to do good on exams, and by the way, you do need to, because the exams are worth 60% of the course grade. Your quizzes are worth 40. And so those 3 exams each are worth 20%. And so you need to do real well on the exams if you want to do well in the class. And so one of the things that you're going to need to make sure you do is make sure that that you really learn your lecture notes. Okay, when it comes time to take that test, you should know your lecture notes inside and out, forwards and backwards. You should be nothing on that lecture notes that you don't know. Okay, not only that, you need to be able to apply it. Okay, be able to think about, okay, what were we talking about? What had we said the reasons were for these things? So it's a really good idea that at least at the end of the week, on Wednesday or Monday, if you have my Monday night class, you should study those lecture notes every week. You should go over, spend 10 or 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, going over those lecture notes, particularly the new stuff that we had just lectured on, but even the old stuff. If you do that, by the time it comes time to take the exam, you're going to know most of that information already. And all you're going to have to do is kind of just refresh yourself and that kind of thing. And so the learning your lecture notes and having your lecture notes. So if you miss a class, as we'll talk about later, one of the things you need to make sure you do is get lecture notes. I can give you copies, although I would prefer that you get copies from one of your classmates, because what exactly is on my lecture notes and what I put on the board, they're not 100% identical. And so you really want the stuff that is on the board. Okay. The other thing you're going to need to make sure you do is know the chapters. About 20% of the questions will come out of the chapters. And so one of the things you're going to need to do is to have learned and have read your chapters, learn your vocabulary, these kind of things, because all of that can come to play on the exam. And so when it comes to exams, you have 4. 3 will be used with the optional final. And like I said, if you have a 70 or above, after you turn in all your other stuff, you are exempt from having to take the final. The only reason you would is if you could get a higher letter grade. And then whether you do or not is totally up to you. Okay. And so we have the exams. You will also have a number of quizzes that correspond with the chapters that we will be lecturing over. Okay. Now, those quizzes technically aren't due. You don't have to turn them in until the end of the semester. Okay. They're open from the very first day, and they remain open to the very last day. But it is be very, very, very important for you to, as you go on through the semester, as we start lecturing on a new chapter, do those quizzes as we're doing them. The last thing you want to do is end up at the end of the semester and you have 4 or 5 quizzes that you have not done, and you're not able to get those turned in before the semester ends. Because when that last day hits and I go to figure out my grades to give you your grades at the end of the semester to enter into the college's system, any quiz that doesn't have a grade in there is going to get a 0. And with quizzes being worth 40% of your course grade, you can't afford to have many zeros, because it can really pull down that quiz average. And for most people, the quizzes should be your best score. There's really no justification. All the answers are found in the book. There's really no justification for you to be making less than, say, an 80-something, a B, and you really ought to be up into the A range. Okay, now, there's always the easy chance of missing 1 question or 2 questions and not getting those right, so that you don't score 100, but you should really be in the mid to upper B's on all of your quizzes, if not in the lower A's. And that will give you some buffer on your exams. If you have a 90-something average or 90 average on your quizzes, but you only have a 60 average on your exams, that 90 average on your quizzes will bring that 60 up into the 70s and will get you above that 70 range, so you don't have to take the final, and you pass the class with a guaranteed transferable credit. Okay, and so make sure you do these quizzes, and it's a good idea to be doing them, working on them every week. As soon as we start lecturing on a chapter, you ought to start working on those quizzes. By the time we get finished lecturing on that chapter, you should be, if not completed, very close to being completed on the chapters. But you do technically have to the end of the semester. All right. Well, what are some of the other rules for the class? Well, let's take cell phones. I will have mine. I'm sure you will have yours. The only thing I ask is you turn it to a silent mode, whether that be completely silent, which would be preferable, or at least do some kind of vibrating mode. If you have a problem of bringing your phone to the class, you're not turning it off, and it goes off in the class, repeatedly disrupting the class, I will ask you not to bring back the phone back to class. If you do, and then it goes off, I will tell you you have to leave the class. Okay? Now, we all can make mistakes. There's almost a guarantee in one of my classes, I'll forget to turn my cell phone to a silent mode, and it will go off. It happens once, no big deal. None of us are perfect. I'm not going to freak out about it. Just get it turned off as soon as you can. If it becomes a repetitive problem, though, that's when it will become an issue. And so make sure you turn your cell phones to a silent mode. Okay? What are some of the other things? Well, one thing that a lot of people will probably want and will need, okay, when it comes to your course, and people ask about all the time, is bonus points. And there are opportunities to make bonus points in this class. You can get up to 15 points, bonus points, added to one of your exam scores. Okay, now not to your overall exam score, but to one of the 3 regular exams. You can get up to 15 points added to that. And so if you made a 60, you add your 15 points, it becomes, for all practical intents and purposes, a 75. Okay? And so there are a number of things that you can do. One is required, more or less. The others are you can choose. The one required is registering to vote. Now, obviously, if you're not an American citizen and or 18 years of age or older, you cannot register to vote. So do not try to register to vote. And for all God's sakes, do not vote. If you are not a U.S. citizen, it is a crime. You can go to prison for it. Okay. But if you are a U.S. citizen and you're 18 or older, you do have to register to vote in this class. The one exception to that are people who have religious objections to registering. For example, if you happen to be Jehovah's Witness. In that case, you just simply tell me, sir, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. You don't have to explain anything more, and you won't have to try to register to vote. You do the other things. And so you will need to register to vote. And the reason is quite simple. First of all, this is a government class. We're going to be talking about how our democracy works. And our democracy only works when the people get out and vote. And so you can't vote if you're not registered. Okay, and so I want to get you registered to vote. If you happen to already be registered, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is show me proof of registration. If you happen to know where your registration card is, you can just bring that in and show me. If you don't freak out. I have no idea where mine is. I vote using my driver's license. But you can go to the Texas Secretary of State's website. There is a link there that it says, am I registered? You click on it, you follow the process, and it can tell you if you're registered or not. If you are, you can either print it off if you did it, like say, on your laptop or your main computer. If you did it with your smartphone, you can simply take a screenshot, bring that to me, show it to me, and you can get your bonus points. And so registering to vote is real simple. If you have to register, you simply can go to the Texas Secretary website again, state website again, or you can go to the Hidalgo County Election Administrator's Office website, and you can download and print off a voter's registration form. All you need to do is simply fill that out. If you do it early on in the semester, mail that in. Once they send you back your voter's registration card, you can show me that, or you can do the other deal. Okay. If you wait towards the end of the semester, you're probably not going to have time for them to get that back for you. And so what you would do then is bring to class the filled out, signed, dated application for registration, an envelope that's addressed to either the Secretary of State's office or the county administrator's office, election administrator's office, with a stamp. You show that to me, that is stamped, is in the envelope, is ready to go, and you can get your bonus points. And so registering to vote is very simple. It's not a difficult process. But if you're not registered, you do have to get registered to vote. Like I said, unless you have some kind of religious or other objection of that form. Now, for all of you who can't do that, or those of you who want to get the additional points, because the first thing you do, primarily register to vote or prove that you are, you get 10 points. You also get a chance at another 5 if you do a second thing. Well, for those of you who can't register and or want to get the additional 5 bonus points, there are several other things that you can do. One of the easiest that you can do is to email an elected official with an issue that you have and a solution. Now, I don't care what the issue is. I don't care what your solution is. That's really your deal. Okay. What you need to do is come up with that issue. And Lord knows right now we have more than enough things that you could find an issue with. COVID, vaccines, the economy, all the stuff that's going on right now. But you pick up, say, this is an issue for me, and this is what I want you to do about it. Then you send that to an appropriate official. Now, since this is a federal government class, most of the deals should be at a federal level, which actually makes it very simple to send off. Okay. They're real easy to get contact with your federal elected officials. Members of Congress, House or Senate, the president. These are people who have very good websites that you can go to. They have a contact me link on there that you fill out who you are, what your issue is, and you send it to them. All you need to do is to show me that you sent that email or that comment on their webpage. And you bring it to me, you show it to me. If you do one of them, you get 5 points, you get 10 points. If you do a second, you can get an additional 5. And now it can be the same issue with the same solution that you simply send to 2 different elected officials. Okay, that one's really easy. Another option, if you're not able to register, or if you want to send a second email or get the second part of the bonus points, is you can go do some form of community service. And there's all kinds of things that you can do. Okay, people go and they work at the United Way. They go to the Salvation Army and volunteer. You can volunteer for the Boys and Girls Club. Doing reading at your local library often have reading programs where you can help young people or even older people or people who need to learn to read or read better. You can help them. One of the more common and one of the ones that people tend to really like is that here in the Valley, like everywhere, we have numerous animal shelters. And you can go volunteer at the animal shelters. And one of the things that people tend to like to do is to go and play with the puppies and kittens. Now, it might sound funny, but they do need people to go play with and handle the puppies and kittens, especially the puppies. Puppies that are handled a bunch by people when they're real young make much better pets. They either think that they're humans or that humans are dogs. I'll let you decide which one you want to think that is what they think, but they make a much better pet when they're handled frequently, held and petted and all that kind of stuff. It makes them bond to humans really, really well. And then when someone goes and they adopt the puppy, then it will bond to that person who adopts it real quickly, and real strongly, and it makes them a much better pet. And so a lot of people say, oh, wait, all I have to do is go play with the puppies for a couple of hours. That sounds great. And to a large extent, that's what you will do. But one thing you do have to realize, there's a really good chance before the animal shelter gives you the honey, they're going to give you the vinegar. And the vinegar is quite simply, you're probably going to have to clean up after. Clean out the kennels, that kind of stuff. And if you know anything about puppies, especially, they're little pooping machines. Okay, food goes in one end, and it almost immediately goes out the other. Okay, and so you might have to do some of that stuff, but you can do that kind of volunteer. We also have a butterfly park here in the McAllen area. It's in Mission. There's all kinds of things. For those of you who are active in a church, another thing that you can do is to do some kind of community service vis-a-vis your church. The only thing you have to be careful with your church is to make sure that the primary beneficiaries is the community, not your church. And by what I mean by that is it can't be something to primarily benefit your church. So for example, years ago, I had a young lady and a young guy come up and wanted to use some of their activities through their youth organization at church. What they were doing, they were going out in the community and trying to get people to come to their church. I had to tell them no on that. And the reason I did was quite simple. The primary beneficiary was their church, not the people. Now, I can understand the church may see it differently, but that's how I was viewing it. And so I had to tell them no. Well, then they brought up another activity that they were going to be doing with their youth organization, and that's that they went out into the community around their church. They had quite a large number of elderly people who own small homes. And one of the big things they did is they would go up to people who had homes that obviously hadn't been painted in a long time. These were generally wood frame homes with wood siding, that kind of stuff. And they offered to paint their homes for free. And if the person agreed, they brought a bunch of paint, a bunch of the young people who showed up, and they painted the house, often cleaned up the yard, did things like that. They asked if that would work, and my answer was most definitely. The primary beneficiary of that act was the elderly people that they were helping. It had to make them feel a lot better that their house was freshly painted, their yard was clean, all of that kind of stuff. Now, they were doing this as a requirement of part of their training through their church that their church required. That's irrelevant. They were still doing something to benefit the community. And so if you have a question about something, whether you can use it, whether it's vis-a-vis a church or not, simply ask. I will tell you there's over a 99% chance that I'm going to say yes. As long as the primary beneficiary is the public. And so if you do two things like that, register to vote if you can. If not, send 2 emails, an email in a community service, whatnot. You can get up to 15 points. And that can be very important, especially if you're borderline getting to a higher grade, or at the very least giving you some cushion if you have to take that final as to what you have to make in order to get to a higher letter grade. Let's say if you have a 60, it'll reduce the score you have to make in order to get to your 70. And it can mean about 1.5 to 2 points. And so if you have a 65, it's not going to get you there. But it could turn that 65 into closer to a 67, which means then your final score doesn't have to be quite as high. Matter of fact, it can be quite literally 15 points lower than what it would otherwise. And so you do have a chance to do bonus points. All right, another issue. Now, this is an issue that is an issue that I haven't really had to deal with on campus, but I have had to deal with it at one of the high schools that I taught at. And that is parent contact. And so under no circumstances will I talk to a parent about a student's performance in the class or any matters concerning the topics and presentation of course materials. Quite simply, whether you're turned 18 or not, in my class under federal education law, you're considered a legal adult. As a legal adult, you have the right to privacy. Now, for many parents dealing with their kids' schooling all the way up from K to 12, parents have what are known as parental rights. Okay? They have a right to know how their child is doing. They have a right to know what their child is being taught. They have a right to know how their child is being taught. They have a right to talk to their child's teachers and other people involved in their child's education. All of a sudden, their child goes off to college. Those rights disappear. All of a sudden, their child is either technically, because they're in college, or literally they're an adult, and they no longer have those rights. You, as an adult, have the right to privacy, which means your parents have no right to know about anything doing with your schooling. Now, whether you choose to tell your parents about it, y'all talk about it, whatever, that's obviously your deal. But if you have a parent that tends to be a little more involved in, say, maybe they should in your education, okay, tell them, do not call me. Do not text me. Do not email me. And do not come by and see me. I will not talk to them. Now, there is technically a document that you can sign by the college that would give me the right to talk to your parents. The problem is that it only gives me the right to. It allows me to. It does not require me to. It's still my choice as to whether I will do so. And I can tell you right now, my choice is no, I will not. Okay, so make sure, tell them, do not contact me. The only time that I ever have had contact with a parent is when there was some kind of severe medical issue with their child. One of the examples, I had a lady call me. Her daughter hadn't been in class, although their daughter had been a very steady attending in class. Her daughter was pregnant. She all of a sudden was having problems with her pregnancy, and she had been ordered to bed rest by her doctor. And she was contacting me because her daughter was upset, all of this. She was obviously concerned, very valid reason to be concerned. And I communicated with her mom, telling her, okay, tell her, don't freak out. There's all kinds of things that we can do. We can make arrangements. You need to contact the college and let the college know that this is going on, that kind of stuff. Outside of something like that, I'm not going to talk to your parents. And some parents have taken this to an unbelievable extreme. Now, I've never heard of it here at South Texas College. Generally, you hear this about at more elite institutions where parents seem to have a bigger stake in their child's education, personal stake, emotional. For example, I think it was at Rutgers University. I read an article, this is 4, 5, 6 years ago, where a mother had to be physically, by the campus PD, physically removed from the campus, meaning the officers grabbed her by the arms and physically escorted her off, told her if she showed back up before the end of the semester, she'd be arrested for trespassing and charged with criminal trespass. Well, what had gone on was simply this. The mom had decided that she was going to help her daughter transition into college. And the way she was going to do that, she was going to spend the first 6 weeks or so of her daughter's freshman year in college, freshman first semester, sleeping on her dorm room floor to help her transition away into college. Okay. Don't know about you, but if my parents would have tried that, my mom would have tried that, I would have killed her. Okay. My parents transitioning me into college was simply telling me, all right, we'll see you when you get back. And I drove off to college, which is the way it really should be. Okay, you're an adult. This is starting a new aspect of your life. You need to learn to be independent and all that kind of stuff. Don't expect this to be a problem, but if you got a parent that's a little more involved than maybe they should, tell them do not contact me. Now, if they have a question, they're perfectly free to ask you. If you can't answer it, you're more than welcome to come to me. I will talk to you about anything involved in the class, about your performance, about the materials, about anything. I'll talk to you about anything concerning the class. Okay. And then if you wish then to take that information back to your parents, well, that's between you and your parents. I have no involvement. I have no role in that. Okay. And so that's between you and your parents. So make sure your parents respect the appropriate boundaries. The next thing, I know many of my colleagues, if students miss too many days in class or whatnot, they drop them from the class. So that you know, I do not drop students. Matter of fact, I don't even know how the process works because I've never done it. If you decide that you aren't going to be able to make the grade that you want in the class, or that you need to stop for some reason whatsoever, you have to drop yourself from the class. If you just stop showing up and it goes past the drop date, I'm not going to drop you. I'm going to get in that last day, or when I'm figuring out the grades to figure out what you made for the semester, and you have a bunch of blank spots where grades should be. Well, guess what? I'm going to be entering zeros in those spots. Okay. And it don't take many zeros getting in tests and quizzes until obviously you make an F. And so it's your responsibility to drop yourself. Okay. Now, if you need to come get my signature, we'll have a discussion about why you're dropping and make sure there's not something I can't help you with. If there's nothing we can do, or you just decided this is not for you, I'll be more than glad to sign your drop slip. Okay? But you have to take responsibility for it. I will not drop you. All right. The next thing, late work. Now, for the most part, the only thing that you have to worry about late work in this class is if you miss an exam. And you need to try very hard not to miss one of the exams. But if you do, or you know you're going to because something has came up, you need to let me know. Now, this can be done very simply. You call me and tell me, email me, send me a message through Blackboard, something that you have told me, sir, I'm missing. I'm going to need to be able to make this up, and here's why. Okay? As long as you do that, you'll be able to make up the exams, no problem. Okay? Now, you will be responsible in getting with me to take the exam. I'm not going to come to you and say, hey, don't forget, you need to take this exam. You know you missed it. You need to get with me and make it up. Okay? And so make sure if you miss an exam, or you know you do, contact me. And preferably before, if that's not possible, as soon as you can afterwards. All right, so that's late work. Okay. If you have any other questions, you can contact me through Blackboards. Last little bit about this stuff is academic dishonesty, aka cheating. Okay. If you are caught cheating on anything, an exam, whatnot, just one time, that's an automatic, not only F for that assignment, which maybe is what you used to get in high school, but it's an F for the course. And this can follow you for years. I remember when I was in college, I was a junior. I was in my fall first semester at Sam Houston State University there in Huntsville, Gold Bearcats. I was taking a music appreciation class. Now, unlike the music appreciation that you may have taken or may take here at South Texas College, in which you better study or you're going to fail, Music appreciation at most senior colleges is what's known as a give me A class. You generally show up, put in a little bit of effort, and you make an A. To give you an idea about the class, we spent most of our time watching Looney Tune cartoons, aka Bugs Bunny, the Road Runner, these kind of cartoons, Elmer Fudd, whomever, Daffy Duck. Might sound like a strange thing to be doing in a music appreciation class, unless you've ever paid attention to the music in those cartoons. They're all classical. They're Bach, they're Mozart, they're Trotsky. They're all the great composers. Okay. Well, so that's kind of what we're doing. And finally, it comes down time for our first exam. And the professor was like, okay, I'm going to make sure everybody has the information you need to pass the exam. And so he handed us the exam questions. To make sure there was no questions, he then gave us the answers to the exams and told us to go study. Well, me and a couple of friends I had made in my dorm happened to be taking the class at the same time. We went back, spent about 30 minutes studying together, and we had everything memorized. Show up for the day of the exam, and I'm flying through the exam because I know everything. And all of a sudden, there's commotion behind me. I kind of glance behind me, and I see the professor grabbing a couple of exams away from a couple of guys and telling them to leave the class. Well, I didn't know exactly what went on, but I knew it wasn't good, at least for those two guys. And so I finished my exam. I turned it in. We come back for the next class period. The professor comes in and says, okay, I want to apologize for those of you that, you may realize we had a commotion in class, and I caught a couple of your classmates cheating, and I kicked them out of the class and gave them an L for the course. What these brain surgeons had done was, instead of spending 30 minutes studying and easily making an A, they had wrote the answers down, A, B, C, D, whatever, to the test. Well, that was stupid for two reasons. First of all, they got caught. The other one is that while the questions were the same, and while the answers for that question was the same, if it was question was A, it was still A. The professor reorganized all the test questions. And so they were going to fail anyway. Well, he kicked them out of the class and gave them an L for the course, and that's where he was going to leave it. Unfortunately for them, though, there was a guy in the class, a guy that, ironically, about my age probably now, who didn't think that was sufficient. He thought they ought to be kicked out of the college. Well, the professor told him, well, I've done what I was going to do. If you don't think that's appropriate, you do have the right to appeal that. And the guy said well, I want to. And the professor went, well, normally you would go to the department chair first, but I am the department chair. So you've already gone to me. You need to go to the dean. Well, this guy took it all the way up to the president of the university and got the boys expelled. They got L's for all their classes. And in their official Sam Houston State University transcript for the fall of 1989, they got expelled for academic dishonesty. I don't know how long it took for the boys to be able to go back to school. And if anybody ever sees that, employers, whomever, obviously it doesn't look very good. So the fact that it's just not worth it. There's not a one of you in this class that if you put the time in reading, studying, doing all that stuff, that you can't make at least a C in my class or better. Okay? It's not worth it. Put in the effort, make the grades, because otherwise it can be really, really severe, the damage you can do to yourself. Okay, well, those are some of the stuff that we're going to have to be doing on the class. If you look through the rest of the book, you'll find out, or the syllabus, the book you need is We the People, the 12th edition. Now, I don't care what book you get. You can get one that's slightly newer or older. Maybe the 11th, 10th will probably even work. Whether you get a hardback, whether you get a paperback, whether you get an ebook, I could care less. The only thing I want and care about is that you do need to get the book. Okay? If you do not have a copy of the book, you're going to find it virtually impossible to pass this class. And if you go out and spend $100 or so on a book, make sure you read it, use it. Don't just sit it there on the shelf. Okay, you're going to need to do that. And so get your book. And other thing is my expectations, and I have certain expectations for you, and there are certain expectations I have for myself. And so one of those is show up to class on time. Now, I know, especially in the fall semester, new students come to campus. I always give people a little bit of a leeway here, usually the first couple of weeks of getting to the class. Okay, you have to figure out where the class is. You got to figure out what parking's going to be like. You got to figure out all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, the reason I'm doing this is that we're not going to be showing up for the first 2 weeks of class because of COVID. Hopefully, we will show up after that. And so I'll give you some leeway. But you do need to try to show up on time and on a regular basis. If you do show up late, don't make a big deal about it. Come in real quickly, quietly, with as least disruption as you can. Sit down and start participating. It is important that you show up. Now, I won't take attendance after the first few weeks. Once I put in attendance for financial aid and that kind of stuff, I won't take attendance after that. If you want to show up, show up. If you don't want to show up, don't show up. That's on you. You're an adult. You make that decision. I will tell you this. There's a very strong correlation to how often someone shows up to class and how well they do in the course. And so if you want to do well, you need to show up. Okay, now I realize life can get in the way. There will be times you get sick, your car breaks down. Those of you who have children, your child gets sick, daycare, disappears on you, whatnot. I understand that. But you do need to, as much as possible, try to show up to class. Okay? Secondly, read the chapters in a timely manner. Now, when I say read the chapters, I don't just mean read it once. Now, reading the chapter just once is far more preferable than not reading them at all. But in a class like this, that you're probably only taking because you have to, you're going to have to put in far more effort to get a lower grade than you would in a class that you're really interested in. It's just a weird thing way schooling works. And so one of the things I usually suggest people, if they're having problems not making the scores that they want, especially on the test, when it comes to reading, generally what I do is I recommend people do this when it comes to reading the chapters. You take your chapter, and the chapters are roughly about 30 pages long. Some are a little longer, some a little shorter, but they're somewhere in that rough category. Break it up into thirds. Find a natural stopping point at about a third way through the chapter. Okay, meaning they're starting talking about a new deal. Read to that point, then immediately go back and reread. Why do I tell you to do this? Well, it's pretty simple. The first time you read that chapter, that first part of that chapter, you have no idea what they're going to be talking about. You don't have any idea what they're going to say. Nothing. You've now read through it to that point. You have an idea now. If you go back and reread that, you're going to be able to remember more. You're going to be able to better analyze the information, maybe kind of think about things that you can apply it to examples that you come up with in the real world, that kind of stuff. Okay? And so you reread it the second time. Then go off. Could be for a few hours, could be for a few days. It all depends upon your particular circumstances. And then reread a third time. I won't guarantee you that you'll get an A if you do that. In my class or other classes, and by the way, this applies to all kinds of classes. But what I will guarantee you is you'll make a much better grade than what you probably would have otherwise. And if you do that before we come to class and we lecture over that material, you're going to be in a much better position to understand what I'm talking about and learning it. The fact is, when you're learning something new, especially something that you're not intuitively just understand. Now, there's some people who intuitively understand things. Okay, I've got a really great buddy of mine. You put him in front of a computer program or any other piece of technology, the guy can spend 10 to 15 minutes playing with it, and then he knows how to use it. Whereas I can spend 5 hours playing with it, and I still haven't figured it out completely anyway. Okay. The more you go over this material, you read, you hear my lecture, you read your lecture notes, you study your vocabulary, you do that kind of stuff. The more you go over it, the better you're going to learn it. It's like anything else. If you were an athlete, you know you didn't learn how to shoot a basketball the first time. It took thousands of shots to get good. If you're doing anything else, it takes repetitiveness to really learn something. And the more you go over this material and the more variety of ways you go over it, the better you're likely to do. And so make sure you read your chapters. Okay. If there's a problem during the semester, let me know. Maybe there's something I can do to help alleviate it. Maybe I have knowledge that you don't, that I can help give you some advice. Or at the very least, maybe I can help make sure that it doesn't negatively impact your class, your performance in the class, or at least minimize any negative impact. But if I don't know about it, there's nothing I can do. Okay, and so if there's a problem, let me know and see if there's anything I can do. If there's something I can do that fits within the rules of what I need to, how I need to do the class, well, then I'll be more than glad to help. If not, I'll let you know, and then we figure out where you need to go from there. What's the best decision for you? Okay, which all of these you will make that decision. Okay, complete assignments on time. The really only thing that this really apply to during the semester will be the test, and you ought to complete the quizzes as we complete lecturing on the chapters. You don't want to wait till the end of the semester because you're not going to do very good on it. Okay. Also, be an active participant in the class. There's nothing more boring than to sit there and listen for me talk for an hour and 15 minutes. It's boring to me. It's got to be boring to you. But if you're an active participant, if I ask the question to the class, if you think you might know it, answer it. Raise your hand and answer it. The worst possible thing you can be is wrong. And actually, that's not a bad thing. In many ways, it's better than getting it right. Because if you got it right, you got it right for one or two reasons. A, you knew the information. You knew the answer, in which case you didn't learn anything. B, you just got a lucky guess. Okay? But if you answered it and it was wrong, and then we go over what the right answer is, there's a really good chance you're going to remember that. And if you see that on a test that comes up, you're probably going to get that question right. Okay, and so try to answer questions. If you already knew all this information, there would be no need for you to take this class, and I wouldn't have a job. And by the way, I kind of like my job, and so ask questions. The other thing is, or answer questions. The other thing is, if you have a question, ask. Okay. Particularly if it's concerning the issues that we're talking about in class, or if it's something major that's going on out in society that you're not sure about, you have questions about, ask. If we have some time, I will discuss about things that are going on in the real world. Matter of fact, most of the best discussions we will ever have in the class aren't necessarily over the topic that we're talking about directly. Often it's about things that are happening out in the world. And if you have questions about that, ask. Because if you have a question, almost certainly other people do. And if we can't really go over it in class, hey, that's what office hours are for. That's what the passing period is before. Okay, in between classes. If I'm in my office and you have a question or something, even if it's not office hours, you're always welcome to come in and ask. If I have the time, I will talk to you about it. Be more than glad to. It's one of the more enjoyable parts of my job. And so be an active participant. Keep absences to a minimum. We already kind of went over that. I know life has a tendency to get in the way, but just try to keep them to a minimum. And then students are expected to talk to me at some point around the midpoint of the semester about their grade. Now, if you're going into Blackboard and you're looking at my grades and everything that you've turned in has been an 80 or above, or even a 70 or above, there's not a whole lot to talk to me about other than me telling you, that a boy, that a girl, keep doing what you're doing, maybe do it even more. Okay. But if you have an average that's less than a 70, particularly if it's less than a 65, you need to come talk to me. We need to figure out what exactly are you not doing that you need to do well in the class. And I can give you all kinds of ideas about studying and preparing for college classes and that kind of stuff. You know, I was in college for almost 10 years. So I know a thing or two. All your professors and instructors do. And so talk to me if you're not doing well, because I can probably give you hints. I can give you ideas about doing things that should help your grade. All right. Well, those are my expectations of you. What are some of my expectations of myself, or what you should be able to have for me? Well, I will be on time to teach class each day. It's a rare exception when I show up late. Usually something's happened. I will be prepared to teach the best class I can each day. Now, I'm human. Some days will be better. Some days will be worse. Some days I'm really on my game. Some days I'm off my game. But I will show up and be ready to teach the best class I can each day. I will strive to get your graded assignments entered into the grade book within 1 week. Well, for this class, that's not a big deal, except for your exams. And generally, if I give your exam, say, on a Monday, generally speaking, I'm going to try to get it to you by Wednesday. I can't promise I will, since I don't come to campus on Tuesdays. But I definitely will have it ready for you by the following Monday or Wednesday. Okay. I will also be in my office hours at the assigned times and possibly outside of my assigned times. If you happen to walk by and it's not my normal office hours, but I'm in my office, if you have a question or concern about the class, you walk in, it becomes office hours. You're more willing to talk to me about anything, even stuff that doesn't directly have to do with the class. If there's things that maybe I have knowledge that maybe you don't. Okay, there's always that chance. Okay, well, the rest of the syllabus, for the most part, you can read for your own. The one part that I do want to talk about, last part, is pregnant and parenting students. Now, there are federal rules dealing with pregnant and parenting students. And so, ladies, obviously, from pregnancy standpoint, you're the ones that this pregnancy part will attach to. If you're pregnant, first of all, I will not ask. That's a dicey thing for a guy to ask any woman if she's pregnant, especially if she turns out she's not. Second of all, we're not supposed to. Okay. If you are pregnant, it would be a nice thing for you to let me know, especially if you think there could be potential issues, that you could have issues, with doctor's appointments, that kind of stuff. If you let me know in advance that this is going to be an issue, then we're almost certainly going to be able to work it out. Secondly, if you start having problems with your pregnancy, let the college know. In your syllabus, it tells you who you can contact. And if you get the college itself involved, then professors technically don't have any choice anyway. But if you get the college involved, then they definitely don't have any choice of following the rules that are laid down. They have to give you certain accommodations. Now, I've always gave the accommodations. Once they came up with these accommodations, I kind of shrugged because it's more or less everything that I had always been doing. And so for me, it was no big deal. But if you are pregnant and if your pregnancy has some problems that could impact the class or other classes, get in contact with the college, the appropriate department, and let them know and let them do what they do. And they will make sure that certain accommodations are afforded to you. Okay. For those of you who aren't pregnant, male or female, who have young children, there are certain accommodations also. So like if your child is sick, you have a doctor's appointment and a doctor's note saying that you had to take your child to the doctor during the class time and you miss an exam or something like that, those have to be excused. That's another thing that if you need to, you might have to go to the college. For me, all you got to do is tell me, sir, I had to take my child to the doctor. That's why I'm missing. Okay, no problem. You just need to get with me, just figure out a time when you can take the test. A lot of times, what I will do is that I will give the test to my secretary for my department, and she's there from almost 9 to 5. And so you would be able to go in and take the test with her. It makes it life a lot easier. You give the test back to her when you're finished, and then she gets it to me. All right. That's pretty much all the stuff I'm going to cover on the syllabus. Okay. If you have any questions about any of this information that we've gone over, feel free to contact me. Like I say, you may call me on my cell phone. We will have the first chapter also online. We'll be getting those online as well. And so once you're finished watching this, there should be another video lecturing on the first chapter that we'll be going over. Start watching that video and doing all the stuff associated with that. Other than that, have a great day. Hopefully, I will see you in a couple of weeks. Goodbye.